It is now almost 2 weeks since that 55-year-old Michigan mother,
Lynette Hooker, simply vanished.
And new evidence suggests she might never have even stepped foot in the water that night. A highly suspicious turn of events unfolded today.
Reports emerging directly from the ground in Elbow Cay suggest that searchers,
including the Royal Bahamian Police and the U.S. Coast Guard, do not believe Lynette ever entered the Sea of Abaco.
the water is simply too shallow, pushing investigators to focus their efforts entirely on land.
How plausible is this theory? And what does a land search even look like right now?
We have some leading experts joining us to break down the details,
Including the latest telling interview with Brian Hooker.
Brian Hooker reported his wife Lynette missing on Saturday, September 4, 2026, claiming they had just gone out to dinner.
They were heading back to their main yacht aboard a small dinghy.
The weather turned rough. She fell overboard, apparently taking the key with her. But he waited hours to report her missing, prompting police to immediately detain him. After hours of intense interrogation, they released him without charge, and he went straight to the media, doing several public interviews,
Declaring his absolute devotion, swearing he would never flee the Bahamas until he brought her home.
Then, out of nowhere, he suddenly flees the country. What secrets is he hiding? Today, we investigate this mystery with our expert panel. Joining us first is an expert in global missing persons cases, working both at home and abroad.
He spends his life tracking down individuals kidnapped or lost on foreign soil.
He is here to dissect every piece of evidence we have so far.
Later, we are joined by another specialist to help us confront the grim reality that this is now a recovery mission, and Lynette may no longer be on this earth. If so, where is her body, and what forensic clues might it still hold? We will explore those critical questions with our second guest as well. First, though, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this crucial episode with a friend. Help us keep this true crime community strong and connected. Now, the mysterious disappearance of Lynette Hooker. To help us unravel this investigation, we welcome Brian Fitzgibbons, Operations Director at USPA Nationwide Security, who specializes in domestic search operations, as well as complex international extractions. Your expertise in tracking global missing persons is exactly why we need your insight on this complex case. Plus, as a military veteran, thank you deeply for your service. We appreciate you being here. We have seen a flood of updates in Lynette Hooker's case as the 2-week mark approaches.
What is your professional take on these massive breaking headlines?
Absolutely. We are seeing some critical new updates unfold. First, Brian Hooker was officially released once the statutory custody limit
Expired in the Bahamian legal system. Knowing that authorities lacked enough probable cause to get a magistrate to hold him in custody reveals exactly how fragile this police investigation currently is. Do you believe investigators can legally force him back to the Bahamas? And isn't it highly unusual that he wasn't forced to surrender his passport and remain local? Yeah, absolutely. Make no mistake, the fact that he was released does not mean this investigation is over.
In fact, less than 18 hours ago today,
Reporters in the Bahamas captured video of United States Coast Guard canine teams searching the Elbow Cay area. This case is far from over. In fact, things might just be heating up. Another massive headline in this case is that he spoke to the press right after his release.
He spent a couple of days in custody
And sat through hours of detailed press interviews. He hired an attorney right away, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We are certainly not suggesting otherwise. While strongly maintaining his innocence, he insisted that he plans to remain in the Bahamas. I wanted to get your thoughts on the interviews he chose to give. Let us listen to a few clips first, and then I want your immediate reaction. It has been 10 days now, a really long time. I do not think I have ever been apart from her for this long in 25 years. She would never give up, and I am not going to either. What do you make of his behavior and the way he carries himself during these interviews?
Yeah, I mean,
Look, I am certainly not an expert on body language.
But it always puzzles me when suspects or defendants in cases like this step in front of cameras.
I understand there is massive pressure on him to put out some kind of statement.
But at this point in time,
I really doubt that making these public statements is helping his legal defense at all.
And I should add, the things he is saying could easily end up hurting his case. And does this behavior completely contradicts the emotions he has previously shown toward his family?
Is this completely out of character for him, or is it typical behavior? We simply do not have the answers to those questions yet.
but I fail to see how these media appearances do him any good.
He reportedly sat down for multiple interviews, including CBS News, NBC, and others.
Let us listen to what the reporter said right before airing the clip on CBS Morning News, and then I want your thoughts.
We spoke with him, but it only lasted about 6 minutes before his lawyer stepped in and shut down questions about the active investigation.
Here is a portion of that interview, and we will discuss it on the other side.
My main goal is to return and talk to the Hopetown Fire and Rescue Team, those search and rescue volunteers. They are still, I believe, searching whenever possible, even while I was held by the Royal Bahamian Police Department. I was actually planning to head out on a boat with a volunteer the very day I was detained.
They were even taking time off work to help me search other areas.
I am simply not going to stop looking. So you intend to keep searching for Lynette? It is going to take someone with real authority to tell me to stop.
Yeah, okay.
You mentioned seeing all the attention this case is getting. Honestly, I have only heard about it. I haven't touched the news or checked social media. Since the day before the accident, my sister flew in to support me and warned me it was getting brutal out there. Then, after a day of searching, I went out for dinner. And some freelance reporter suddenly walked up to me. That was when I realized things were going to get ugly.
First off, I mentioned this in a previous episode, but watching it again, it stands out even more.
I have worked on plenty of missing persons cases. Some were kidnappings. Others were just people walking away from their lives.
The situations differ, but for the families, the nightmare is always the same.
The loved ones are usually completely out of their minds with worry.
They stop eating. They stop showering. They just fall apart. But this man went out for a nice dinner. That really bothers me. You have investigated so many of these disappearances. What is your read on this?
You are absolutely right, especially during those critical first few weeks.
Hours feel like days, and days feel like months under that kind of crushing pressure.
Yet, he is busy coordinating press interviews.
But let's pause and go right back to the very beginning. Early on, he posted a carefully crafted statement on his Facebook page. It seemed designed to shape the story.
And that is exactly what we see in these interviews.
And that is likely why he cut it short. Some of the best reporters in the business ask questions like interrogators.
People in the press, just like you, Matt, right? As investigative journalists, your sharp, direct questions probably forced him to end the interview. Because the narrative was slipping out of his control. He simply could not give a straight answer anymore. So, honestly, my immediate reaction is that he desperately wanted to display some grief to the public.
That is exactly what he tried to project during the interview.
Whether that act worked or not, I think it completely failed. Because he still refuses to answer the critical questions. But what actual information could he access while locked up for those couple of days? And how much of the search could he actually lead once they let him go?
We already know he fled. He is safely back in the States. Even though he promised he would never leave.
He swore she would stay for him, preaching that sob story to the reporters.
But what were his options? What could he really find out?
How helpful could he actually be? Remember, there was a window of several days. And though I do not have the exact timeline, he had a massive head start before the police finally locked him up. That is nearly 3 full days with his phone in his hands. watching the news of her disappearance blow up across the internet. He was even using Facebook Messenger, and those leaked chats tell a fascinating story, saying, "Hey, I bet you have seen all these articles, right?" So we know he tracked the news. It completely contradicts everything he claims in this interview. So, he was fully aware of this, even before they took him into custody. That this story about Lynette's disappearance had already exploded into international headlines. So, where do things stand with the search? It has been nearly 2 weeks now. We have someone who went missing in the water, whether by accident or something worse. But as you know, the clock is ticking to find her. Especially in a body of water with predators. We are talking sharks and things like that.
Yeah, and we actually had a major development unfold today.
Reports are coming in from the ground at Elbow Cay that the search teams, including the Royal Bahamian Police Force and the United States Coast Guard, no longer believe Lynette is actually in the Sea of Abaco. The water there is too shallow, so they are focusing heavily on a land search. So, that is a massive piece of the puzzle right there, isn't it? The search teams are openly telling the media that they really do not believe there is any chance she is in the Sea of Abaco right now. That completely changes the game. Absolutely. And it completely shifts how they look for physical evidence. Ashley Banfield was on the scene today, walking the area near the resort bar and pool they frequented. And she found, despite what I first assumed, that there were actually several security cameras around. So, now we are going to see the fundamental, ground-level steps of this investigation start to happen. Analyzing security footage. Does this video evidence back up or completely contradict the hours of statements Brian Hooker gave to police? And is the story he is telling them actually true? Exactly. And they are going to take this one step at a time, building the investigation brick by brick, possibly laying the groundwork for a case against him. And it is not just the strange statements he made on camera during those interviews when his wife went missing, but it is also what has been revealed by his stepdaughter, Carly Aylesworth, whom I spoke to directly. She describes a history of abuse, detailing exactly what she and her stepsister allegedly witnessed. But she also received a couple of tense voicemails from him right after her mother vanished. I actually have one of those recordings, and it is a key piece of evidence that detectives are listening to closely as they investigate. Well, honey, I just heard from Hopetown Search and Rescue. They found the life ring I threw to Mom when she fell overboard. They said they haven't located her yet. But they can now concentrate their entire search on a much smaller area. Then on Wednesday, Brian posted on Facebook, writing in part that he was heartbroken over the boating accident that caused his beloved Lynette to fall from their small dinghy. Despite my desperate attempts to reach her, the strong winds and currents pushed us further apart. So that aligns perfectly with what he claimed in that Facebook post. But honestly, this completely throws their entire timeline out the window, especially if she was never in that water to begin with, and the search has shifted entirely to land. That action right there suggests this might have been planned in advance, with a deliberate attempt to cover up his tracks afterward. And when you think about it, he likely fabricated a cover story just to buy himself some extra time. But we have to remember, none of these details have been 100% confirmed yet. Keep in mind, this entire crime scene is the open ocean. So where does the focus shift now? Investigators have already processed the 55-foot sailboat, the Soulmate. They also swept the dinghy for physical evidence. Now, investigators are carefully backtracking their exact movements, searching for any security footage or digital video evidence along the way, while conducting interviews with local resort staff. And then there is the search using specialized cadaver dogs. I learned something fascinating today. These highly trained dogs can detect a decomposing body up to 30 feet underwater. Right. To put that in perspective, the Sea of Abaco only reaches a depth of about 15 feet where he claims Lynette went missing. So, apparently, as the body decomposes, gases rise to the surface,
allowing the search dogs to catch the scent.
And when you pay attention to the quiet whispers, unofficially, from law enforcement officials close to the search, they are quietly admitting they do not believe her body is in that stretch of water at all.
That realization is going to completely shift the
Focus of this investigation very soon.
Tragically, we know the Coast Guard has already downgraded this from a rescue mission to a recovery operation.
Since that shift happened a few days ago, what do you think is happening behind the scenes right now? Weighing the known facts against all the unanswered questions.
What would this active recovery operation actually look like on the ground?
Honestly, a maritime recovery operation like this is incredibly exhausting and labor-intensive. Remember, there is a very strict limit on how long these tracking dogs can work each day. It demands immense physical effort. Therefore, they must strategically plan which specific grids to focus on, using only the absolute best leads, because their resources are incredibly limited. That is the reality of the physical search efforts underway right now. Meanwhile, a secondary angle of this criminal investigation is quickly coming. Together, detectives need to verify a crucial detail, specifically whether Lynette was really making plans to return home. Had their marriage completely fallen apart? Were they facing financial strain? Was there a history of abuse? Investigators are building a parallel timeline in the background, desperately trying to establish whether a clear motive for murder existed. But that brings me right back to my original question. Why on earth did authorities allow him to just walk away? It seems clear they lacked the hard evidence to formally charge him, even after keeping him detained for several days. So what does the extradition process look like when you are dealing with a foreign nation like the Bahamas? Well,
remember that United States federal law enforcement, specifically the Coast Guard, is already heavily involved in this case.
because of that, there are well-established legal treaties and protocols between the Bahamas and the United States to handle this. But we must emphasize that, at the end of the day, Brian Hooker remains innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Right?
So, in the court of public opinion, his story is already falling completely flat.
But to survive in a real courtroom, investigators must secure solid physical evidence to push this case forward. And as of right now, we know that simply does not exist. Still, a massive amount of work is underway behind the scenes to change that. Remember, law enforcement is not out there just to target Brian Hooker. These detectives are entirely focused on uncovering the truth of what happened to Lynette. And that is highly important for everyone to remember. As we approach the 2-week mark, what key details are you keeping your eye on? Looking ahead to the coming weeks, my primary hope is that investigators will finally be able to locate Lynette, and that these intensive search efforts will bear fruit. The second major element that I believe will start bubbling to the surface is the background data.
What was truly happening inside their personal relationship?
What had she already shared with close family and friends? Was Lynette actually planning to return home and end things with Brian for good? Once investigators begin to verify these critical puzzle pieces, a much clearer picture of this mystery will finally start to emerge.
And we could see a major breakthrough in the case this weekend.
Brian Fitzgibbons, thank you for your incredible work and for sharing your insights with us. As Director of Operations at USPA Nationwide Security, your expertise in tracking and security is invaluable.
Especially when it comes to locating and extraditing missing individuals globally.
We truly appreciate you joining us today. Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on. Now, we must address a grim reality, the highly likely possibility that Lynette is no longer alive. This shift is real because the active search teams, including the U.S. Coast Guard, have stopped looking for a survivor. Their mission has officially transitioned into a recovery effort. What does this mean for locating her? And what critical physical evidence might still be preserved on her body if we are indeed dealing with a homicide? We have a leading forensics expert here to help us understand. Joining our discussion is a highly respected voice in the true crime community and a personal friend.
Joseph Scott Morgan,
Forensics professor at Jacksonville State University and host of the hit podcast Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan.
Thanks for being with us, Joseph.
My pleasure, Matt.
Our hearts go out to Lynette and her family, but as the clock ticks past the 1-week mark,
What are your thoughts on where this investigation currently stands?
And the state of the evidence? Much of what investigators gather here is going to be purely circumstantial, Matt.
Right now, we must focus entirely on what is left behind. In this case, that means the 2 vessels and what secrets those boats might hold. From a forensic perspective, my immediate concern is always scene security. Whether it is a house, a vehicle, or a complex marine vessel like we have in this situation, where we have the primary boat and the dinghy, I need to know what kind of forensic value those vessels will yield, and whether the chain of custody has been tightly secured from the start. Needs to be examined. Honestly, the options are completely wide open in terms of what we might uncover, but finding a needle in a haystack?
this is the worst place to look.
Operating in a marine environment makes these cases incredibly difficult to investigate. The reports we are getting describe chaotic waters, intense storms, and unpredictable conditions. And then, of course, we have the missing key.
You are absolutely right. As the clock keeps ticking, trying to piece this mystery together becomes almost impossible.
That is going to be a massive roadblock moving forward for anyone investigating this disappearance. My heart goes out to the family. They are stuck in a completely isolated, devastatingly lonely position right now,
I have reported on many cases like this.
where grieving families are simply left drifting in limbo. I am desperately hoping for answers, just like with the young man who recently vanished in Barcelona.
I hope the FBI steps in and lends their full weight to this, to really help move this investigation forward. Of course, the primary goal right now is still to find her.
We would all love that outcome. But from a detective standpoint, the scene must be tightly secured and carefully processed by professionals who know exactly what they are doing. We do know from the United States Coast Guard that they have search teams deployed,
And they are fully assisting in the hunt for this missing American in the Bahamas.
but the mission has tragically shifted from a search and rescue to a recovery operation.
Her loved ones are slowly accepting the devastating reality that her chances of survival at this point are practically zero.
I spoke with her daughter.
Carly Aylesworth, just recently. She has launched a GoFundMe page to help.
It is meant to fund her travel to the search site, and sadly, cover eventual funeral costs as she prepares for the worst.
If investigators are searching for remains in a massive body of water,
What does that process entail?
to physically locate her while still preserving crucial evidence that might be left on the body, it is incredibly difficult. This is a world away from trying to find remains in a quiet lake, a river, or even a swamp. We are talking about the vast Caribbean Sea, stretching right out into the Atlantic Ocean. It is a brutally harsh environment, incredibly unforgiving. I do not mean to sound insensitive or overly graphic here, but I began my career in New Orleans, so I spent years investigating cases all around the Gulf of Mexico. When retrieving human remains, the constant push and pull of deep ocean tides, combined with hungry marine life, changes things incredibly fast.
Meaning critical evidence gets compromised almost instantly.
It degrades fast. So, tracing specific forensic evidence under these conditions is going to be an uphill battle.
Please forgive my bluntness. I want to hold on to hope, but we must face the reality of a recovery mission. One of the most difficult challenges in a post-mortem investigation is separating injuries sustained before death from the damage that occurs after death, or what forensic experts technically call insults to the body.
Meaning the severe physical wear and tear caused by this harsh aquatic environment. Out in the water, if a person is already dead,
The body reacts in a totally different way. From a forensic standpoint, you need a highly trained eye to tell these two scenarios apart.
You absolutely cannot jump to conclusions in these cases.
Because the smallest detail, Matt, can completely flip a case when you are dealing with water, especially in the Bahamas.
How does that actually work?
I mean,
If a person has died, do they usually float or do they sink?
With a dead body, what happens first is a sinking phase where the remains go under.
And then, as natural decomposition starts to take hold, gases build up, causing the remains to float right back up to the surface.
But the biggest obstacle you are up against,
And this is a grim, harsh reality, is that some of the most dangerous apex predators on Earth are swimming in those exact waters. I am talking about different species of sharks circling out there, alongside other aggressive marine life. That is something recovery teams have to actively battle while trying to search the area. So these search and rescue teams must keep their eyes wide open. And the actual divers who first make physical contact with the remains have to know exactly what they are doing.
You cannot just pull a body out of the water and toss it into a boat.
Right. You have to preserve and protect the body from the very beginning.
Because at that crucial moment, the victim is your absolute most valuable piece of evidence.
So you really must be highly trained to do this work. Every detail matters, because the devil is always in the details.
Yeah.
I completely share your sympathy for the family, and I am keeping them in my prayers. If there is any chance at all, I pray that she is found alive. Same here, but my focus immediately shifts to the actual case and the next steps, right?
You know, because new reports are coming out that her husband, Brian, was taken in for questioning. Investigators questioned him multiple times, but with no official charges filed, he was released.
He has already chosen to leave the Bahamas. That is the breaking news as we do this interview. When I spoke with his stepdaughter,
When I talked to Carly,
she claimed that both she and others had witnessed physical abuse between them in the past.
so, if there was some kind of violent struggle before she ended up in the ocean,
Before Lynette disappeared, would any forensic evidence remain on her body once she is recovered? That is entirely Matt. That is highly dependent on how fast her remains are located, because you're dealing with rapid physical decomposition. For example, let us say a person was struck before they went under. Maybe they took a heavy blow to the jaw. Or maybe they were choked, leaving finger marks and bruising on their arms. Right? If they are exposed to this harsh ocean environment, especially the marine predators living there, that evidence can easily vanish.
and I want to be extremely careful with how I phrase this, okay?
A body can...
people can draw their own conclusions from what I say, but when we think about the Caribbean, right?
We picture that stunning turquoise water, don't we? But I don't think people realize just how treacherous it is. It's a brutal, unforgiving environment. You don't think about danger when looking at paradise, but it's there. And the ocean is not kind to the dead. Not at all. I just hope they can find her. I hope they can recover her body intact, because like everyone else, I want closure. I've been following this investigation closely, hoping we'll finally get some real answers, right? Perhaps she suffered some kind of sudden medical emergency. We would finally understand, assuming a thorough forensic examination is actually conducted, whether she actually drowned, or if there is some kind of physical trauma left behind on her remains that could have been lethal or perhaps triggered a fatal event, which examiners could easily identify. But once again, time is the enemy, just as it is when hunting for a survivor.
With a corpse, from a forensic and evidentiary standpoint, time remains absolutely critical.
So, what questions are lingering, and what are you keeping an eye on? Well, at the absolute top of my list, besides recovering the body of this poor lady, are those vessels. I desperately want to ensure that those boats
Are secured so that forensics can thoroughly examine them.
And next, I want any witness statements from people who might have spotted them out there at some point. That is truly
The core of an investigation when you piece together circumstantial clues that begin to surface.
Where you can stitch all of those details together, allowing you to map out the broader narrative. That is absolutely critical.
But as for the vessels,
I need to understand this dynamic, because we can both agree this entire sequence of events is deeply confusing.
that is precisely why the public is so captivated by this case.
Because the story makes no sense.
And I am determined to untangle it.
Is there physical evidence left on either boat? Was there some kind of mechanical failure?
Is there anything on board that could provide crucial, high-value trace evidence?
And I am talking about things so incredibly minute that investigators would have to actively hunt for them.
Any obvious trace of blood.
A stray hair or unusual scratches and gouges inside the dinghy that seem out of place.
And has any surface been deliberately altered?
Did someone try to wipe it down? As a detective stepping in blind, you have to ask these questions.
You keep your field of view incredibly wide, right? And you must weigh every single detail, because if you miss it now, you can't undo that mistake later, Matt. You must act early in the game, and you have to push, push, push.
Right. And you mentioned having experience with maritime investigations, which is incredibly fascinating.
To be honest, I haven't worked many cases involving open water. To be completely frank with you, aside from standard missing persons cases involving a swimmer who vanished. But your point reminds me of his exact claims about throwing her a life ring or something to save her life. Well, that item really should be missing from the dinghy, correct?
Details exactly like that. Yes, absolutely.
Think about it. I worked on an HBO documentary a few years ago about Natalie Wood, and that remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries we have.
exactly. It is a true crime classic, and even now, everyone still has questions about what happened.
One reason it is so deeply confusing is because it deviates so far from the norm. You mentioned earlier that you do not normally cover these kinds of cases. And that is true. There really are not many major incidents that happen aboard boats. At least not compared to the typical cases we see.
Those crimes that take place on city streets or right in the middle of suburban neighborhoods. It makes this a highly specialized type of forensic investigation.
You have to look for physical evidence that might be missing or altered.
We are talking about things like life preservers, safety rings, items like that.
Does any of that align with what you would typically expect to find?
What did they actually have access to, and how was it used? When I am interviewing a witness, I will ask the same exact question 5 or 6 different ways. I need to be absolutely certain that I fully grasp their story and the facts. Especially with a case that has so many complex, tiny details.
My goal is to hear the exact same core truth from a fresh perspective every single time I ask.
The Bahamian authorities detained them. I should say detained rather than arrested and released. Right, and that is exactly why I prefer to have our colleagues at the FBI step in, because they are stationed at consulates all over the world. Right. They are stationed there specifically to assist United States citizens. When an incident occurs, I want them on the ground immediately, ready to respond. That way, our citizens have real advocacy and support when traveling abroad. I always think back to what happened over in Barcelona. Frankly, I still have major questions about how that entire investigation was managed. And I strongly advised from the very beginning that our local consulate and the FBI representatives should have been actively tracking that case. Look, it is already incredibly difficult for families navigating a crisis in a foreign country, but it is infinitely worse when a loved one vanishes. That is the absolute worst-case scenario for any family. I really appreciate your insights. How can listeners find you, and where is your podcast available? Yes, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan is streaming on all major platforms, including iHeart, Apple, Spotify, and now our own YouTube channel. We are dipping our toes into those visual waters now. A bit intimidating, but the channel has been live for a month, hitting 7,000 subscribers already, and all our classic episodes are up.
Next, we are transitioning into full video episodes. Mind you, I have got a face that only a mother could truly love.
We will see how the camera treats me, but I am actually pretty excited about this step. You can also find me at Jacksonville State University, specifically working in the Department of
Forensic Investigation as their Distinguished Scholar of Applied Forensics.
I really appreciate your time. I will leave the link in the description below.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I have no doubt your channel will thrive.
Honestly, I am quite new here too. It is an intimidating, massive world that I am still figuring out, but we are in this together. I look forward to crossing paths with you at CrimeCon very soon.
The countdown is on, and it is only a couple of weeks away.
I cannot wait to connect, and maybe we can grab a coffee to catch up.
Absolutely. Thank you once again.
Let us keep Lynette's family and loved ones in our thoughts and prayers.
I will track this case closely. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend.
Until then, stay safe and stay vigilant. We will see you next time.